All right, everyone, we are back. I'm your host, Jacob Friedman, and welcome to Cutting Through the Noise. Today's guest is a United States Marine Corps veteran who spent many years in the world of technology. He now leads cybersecurity and compliance at a major manufacturing company headquartered here in Chicago. Our chat today will highlight some trends relating to resilience, development, and speaking the language of business. So buckle up and get ready, because if a question pops into your head, feel free to drop it in the chat below. Without further ado, please welcome Joe Mariscal. Hey, Joe.
Uh,
Thanks for hopping on. Appreciate it.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Appreciate the opportunity.
Of course, man. Glad to have you. So, during some of our discussions, we've talked about stress management in the workplace, building resilience. One of the things I wanted to start out with was that an article in 2024 published by Forbes showed that nearly a quarter of CISOs and IT security decision makers are struggling with leaving their roles. 93% of them are citing that overwhelming stress is the key driver. So, given that you're a veteran, you've been in the industry for a while, how do you manage your stress?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've definitely burned out from my last organization, and I had to take that step back. I was lucky enough with my current organization that I was able to, be in the right culture. I was able to build back, all the skills that I needed to and kind of the mindset. I also learned a lot about what not to do to avoid that again. Stress and work-life balance has been a very strong focus of mine, obviously for that reason. So you as the leader need to set the pace and lead by example. You need to actively work hard to relax. So
Mm,
making sure I have a way to walk away from the job and disconnect by building in the proper escalation and processes for my organization has been key. And knowing really that only certain items are going to bubble up to me. So the focus as head of cyber is to make sure I am getting downtime, I'm recharging, and I'm certainly not burning out. I want to make sure that I want to avoid burnout because if I do, I'm no use to my team. I'm certainly no use to my organization. I'm certainly no use to myself. In my off time, I spend a lot of time. My wife and I spend a lot of time with family. We off road. We're out in nature. I prioritize sleep. That's a big one as well, and we travel. So really, these are all things that actively require my mind to be somewhere else instead of focusing on cybersecurity. You want to pick items that where you can focus elsewhere, and your brain is getting that downtime, is getting that relaxation time. It's not constantly churning through those cybersecurity concerns. Um, Also, a bit counterintuitive. I spend a good amount of my time learning and improving my craft. I find that the more I learn, either to improve or to understand things I don't understand, the less stressed I am about what's coming around the corner or just things in
mm,
general. So cybersecurity is constant high stress, right? We know this. There's a lot of high reward in the form of job security and pay, but like anything, you need to come to it ready to fight, right? You need to come to it trained or continue to train to make sure that you're staying resilient. You can't just show up every day and think that it's going to work out. You definitely have to be self-aware. It's not a sign of weakness or confidence or skills. If you're starting to stress, overstress, starting to burn out, you need to be able to identify that. Taking care of yourself, getting a good amount of sleep, and recharging are key. And
yeah.
actively, yep, processing and reducing the stress will definitely help you stay in the game and stay resilient. Another method that I've tried is basically embracing the chaos, right? So try to reframe the issue when it gets chaotic. What am I learning? Everything that you do is a chance to learn something new. And overall, I mean, the universe occasionally can be your adversary, right? So don't join the universe and make it two against one against yourself.
Well, there's a lot to digest in that. First of all, I think it's super important to disconnect from technology, whether that's spending time with family, getting out in nature. We spend so much time glued to our devices that's a great call out. We tend to slip into burnout without realizing it, just because a lot of people's recharge can still be related to a device, right? Another thing that I really like that you point out is continuous learning. I think that can help make the job still align and be your passion rather than a chore. When you're actually wanting to continuously learn and you're excited to read things about that are related to your industry or profession. So those are great call outs. As a leader, how do you go about building more resilient teams?
Cyber resilience is really, the key word of the day, right? It allows us to recover faster, cheaper, and with less impact to the organization. So if you take that to the direction of the team, the concept of a resilient team means that they work on a monitored amount of hours per day with a minimum amount of stress and moderate work. So that way, when it gets really bad, they can now perform at 100%. If you're already pushing them to 100% or over, you're not going to get very good output during an incident or a crisis, right? Or there's bigger chances for making a mistake. So the focus then is to build resilience. Coming from that military mindset, I really focus on taking care of the team. First and foremost, don't overwork the teams, right? I've worked hard to ensure my company understands that there's only so much that you can get out of the teams given the resources around people, process, and technology. The focus in general is around 45 hours per week. There can be more, there can be less. But if you're getting up around 60, 70 hours per week, we need to talk about that. We need to understand what's going on and remediate that. I can't expect somebody to perform that level and then, like I said, be available during a crisis. You definitely need to encourage your team to take time off. And the only way to do that
Mm,
is to make sure that you have cross training and up training and you're understanding the gaps in the environment. This not only helps the whole team in general, again, back to that learning structure, but if somebody needs to take personal time off, mental time off, vacation, or just general breaks, other people can step in or step up as needed. That reduces the people that are staying back because they're ready for that. And then, of course, it gives that person that's taking that time off better clarity or better ability to disconnect. You definitely want to make sure that teams are taking, when their time off is actual time off. So end of their day, they're not watching email, they're not watching text messages, right? There should be that escalation process that will contact them if something's occurring. But I need them to be able to recharge, to disconnect and recharge and come back refreshed to focus on the duties. And this can be breaks, lunge away from screen time, vacation, things like that. Maybe a little bit more contentious, but be generous and responsive with time off. If somebody's putting in extra time, comp time is a big thing of mine. We want to make sure that we comp them, that the way they can deal with some of the issues that they weren't able to deal with while they were dealing with whatever stressful event was occurring. And absolutely, if they're having a personal or family problem, I need them to deal with that first. Okay, I need them to focus, because if they come into work and they're still focused, half their mind is still focused on whatever stressful issue that is, the likelihood of them creating an incident or missing something key is higher. And of course, you want them to take care of it. You want them to come back fully recharged.
yeah,
So
I mean, I was going to say just, when they're not feeling their best, they're not going to perform their best. And I was just going to ask you then, well, how do you kind of pay attention to that? Are there any warning signs that typically stand out for you that that, wow, this guy on my team needs a little bit more attention or et cetera?
yeah, mental and physical health matters, and it's the key to the resilience, retention, and performance of the individual and the team. So ultimately, you're working to build the culture for the team that the team members want to stay with. There can be obvious signs. Most managers, by the time they realize it, it's typically too late. So you really want to get to know your people, work with them on a one-on-one basis, have regular discussions. Of course, you want to watch for blow-ups, major mistakes they don't care about, or sudden and uncharacteristic days off. Again, I advocate for knowing your people, working with them on a regular basis. We want to make sure that we monitor for signs of smaller mistakes building up, or employees that rarely make mistakes suddenly not caring. A change in behavior, this can be anything, but basically a deviation from the norm. So a quiet employee suddenly challenging you, or even a typical employee that challenges you suddenly going quiet, right? Are they suddenly negative? Even a sudden positive outlook. We definitely want people to be positive. We definitely want people to be happy. But if they're, just kind of a neutral employee and suddenly they're happy, it could be because they burned out and that they are quiet quitting or getting ready to quit. And now that stress is reduced. Either way, you should know what is occurring. Talk to them about stress and burnout, and of course, genuinely care.
Yeah, and I think that that deviation from the normal is a great way to pay attention to those warning signs. But once again, it comes down to you as a leader knowing your people. What is their normal? What is their baseline? I think that's a great call out. So just to pivot topics a little bit, one of the conversations that we had prior and that I have with a lot of the other leaders in my network is that they struggle to get buy-in from the business. Sometimes we're working with very technical folks and being able to translate their needs from a technical matter to a business matter, whether that's staffing, funding, attention, prioritization, et cetera. How have you gone about achieving that kind of buy-in from non-security stakeholders in the past?
It's all about building relationships with stakeholders across the organization, understanding what they need. Working with the stakeholders to align the mission of cyber with the needs of the business. Remember, cyber's there for the business only. So if you understand what the needs are for the business and you're saying, hey, here are the controls, here are the things that I can help to improve your success, you're going to get a lot more buy-in, right? Of course, having a great management stack helps, but if you don't feel you have that management stack, building that trust and credibility may help change that. Having the courage to say the things that need to be said. Sometimes you're just in a room and tactfully, of course, but you can say, here's where the risks are. Here's what we've dealt with well. Here's where our open risks are. Or when this particular situation's coming in, here's are some upcoming risks. If the business or executive management doesn't know the issues, they don't have the option to properly address from a business context. Remember, cybersecurity exists and really should only be executed within the context of the missions or the enterprise's missions, goals, and objectives. Uh, Talking with leadership, of course, you never want to let a crisis go wasted, right? You don't want to create crisis, but you don't want to let it go wasted. So anything that's happened internally to peers, to competitors across the industry, you can use those as examples to demonstrate the business risk to executive management. And your job, of course, is to advocate for the business. So, and often it really goes back to an often legitimate gap for cybersecurity as a whole. Oftentimes, cybersecurity doesn't really understand the business. And the biggest failure a cyber program can make is failing to align cybersecurity with the enterprise objectives.
Yeah. I mean, in a perfect secure world, right, you'd be in a concrete room with no doors and no windows and completely closed off, but you can't run a business like that. And so there's certain levels of risk that you have to accept, certain, methods of business that you have to enable. I think that's a great call out that some of these cyber leaders need to understand that at the end of the day, they're here to responsibly enable the business. They can't be a barrier or else it's going to be really hard to get people on your side. Um,
Absolutely. Right.
so, what are some other recommendations that you might have for other leaders that are struggling with this? And is there any kind of difference in terms of how you present this based on how big their company is?
Yep. So the job is to properly convey the risks and costs to securely meet the needs and then execute based on whatever the business decisions are. So ultimately, cybersecurity has two functions: revenue and brand protection. That's pretty much it. But you can use that to build your business case. Cyber is rarely going to be thought of as a profit center. But going back to that revenue and brand protection, what are the tools, the abilities, the people process technology you can bring to that table to protect the business's brand and revenue, right? What are you doing that will force multiply their chances of success, be it expansion, new products, and acquisition? Ultimately, again, you want to align cyber controls and protections with the needs of the business.
It's a great call out. Um, in terms of speaking the language of the business, is this a security leadership skill? Do you think everyone of all levels should have this capability?
Everybody should have the capability. One of the skills I'm constantly working on is speaking business, the language of the business. I'm getting better, but I implore each and every cyber person to make this a key core concept for their career arc, is to understand and speak business. It's very beneficial for cybersecurity to be clear and concise with executive management concerning risks. If you've ever tried to explain cross-site scripting with executive management, it's not going to work, right? It's not because they're dumb. It's because they don't have that vocabulary. They're not focused on that. But if you're able to identify or demonstrate that a recent vulnerability scan identified a major vulnerability in an external facing system, and if that were compromised, it would lead to X amount of time, which would mean Y amount of dollars. now you probably have their attention. So, and it's also important for cybersecurity leaders to be working on business language skills with junior people. First and
Mm.
foremost, you're laying the groundwork and understanding for why that business skill is critical. And secondly, they have to remember that they're building the next generation of cybersecurity leaders, and you're setting them up for success.
It's a great call out. And I think that people, whether they're a practitioner or even sellers, should get this memo as well sometimes of being able to speak the language of business, being able to articulate value to multiple sets of stakeholders who all come from a different realm of knowledge is a super helpful skill, right? We're trying to get everyone to row the boat in the same direction. So you got to be able to speak in a way that resonates with each of them. So definitely agree with that. And I think that even outside of just the security practitioner world, everyone could benefit from trying to communicate in ways that resonate well with those around them. Um, in terms of like building a program around business needs, right? You're meeting with these executives, you understand what they want to accomplish. How do you go about building these processes? And are there any challenges you have with that?
Again, I'll reiterate, cyber is there to support the business, right? Full stop. So you want to make sure that you're understanding the business. You want to work on having an independent risk review done, and then you want to build a risk register. You want to understand the risk tolerance of the business. So that's working with the executive management and understanding at what point do we want to mitigate these particular risks? At what point are we comfortable with a loss? That should be done in a scoring system. And then anything above that tolerance should be mitigated to that tolerance. And then you move on to the next prioritized item. And you want to make sure that you're basing these priorities around the risks to the business, not necessarily cybersecurity.
That's a great call out. And on this one, which might be a little bit out of the left field, but when technology is brought into play, sometimes it can be, hard to figure out if this truly will, make the impact that they're saying. What are some methods that you do to basically empower yourself to make the best decision for tool selection as you're going out and building these programs?
A lot of times is having the privilege to have people that are smarter than me on my team. I'm definitely not threatened by having that, having those smart people on them, listening to them. Again, that goes to building up skills, that goes to building up camaraderie and trust in the team and overall. So again, back to resilience, but understanding and maybe even divvying out researching particular tools that will help bring in a better protection for that end result. Of course, you can do plenty of reading, see where other people have failed and things like that. But yeah, that's typically where I start is a little bit of research and a little bit of assignment or delegation to somebody to come back with the best ideas.
Well, surrounding yourself with smart people is definitely a key component of every great leader that I've met thus far, right? You can't be everywhere at once. And if you were, as we mentioned earlier, you probably burn out pretty quick, right? So it's good to
Definitely.
have be surrounded by people that you can trust. Slight pivot on this as well is now as we're getting into the vertical that you work within, manufacturing. What are some challenges that they're facing within cyber?
The barrier to entry of manufacturing, at least metals manufacturing, doing something with metal and adding value is fairly low. It's not hard to start with some sort of machinery, and within a couple of years, maybe a decade, you've built up a nice business and a good customer base. Unfortunately, we've seen with a lot of the smaller shops is that there's not a lot of focus around, cybersecurity or security in general, right? They'll do just the minimum for any number of reasons. Because in the metals industry, there's so much acquisition. My current company, Ryerson, we purchase a lot or we grow by acquisitions. So understanding what the risk level is pre and post acquisition, coming in and having a process to identify the risks across the organization, what needs to be mitigated, what needs to be replaced, upgraded, anything like that. And then again, bringing up that aligning to the risk tolerance of the business, and then eventually connecting up the networks and moving forward. The other problem that is really big in manufacturing across the board is operating technology, Internet of Things, and industrial Internet of Things. Knowing what there is, where they are, and of course, if you don't know about them, you can't control them. So a lot of times we'll find that companies have these on a very flat network. They'll have out of date, unpatched, end of life systems that are cost prohibitive to upgrade on the same network as the corporation. So, or as the regular corporate network. So you want to make sure that you understand how those devices operate what's talking to them, what they're talking to, whether there's remote support, and then usually it's some sort of level of segmentation, patching if you can. But basically, logical physical segmentation. Typically, it's with some sort of firewall or security device. If you need to access that segmentation, you would use, a VPN or some sort of other encrypted channels. Remote vendors need to come in with strong credentials, VPN, MFA on that. Of course, you want to make sure you're changing default passwords. We see that all the time on all of these devices. You want to make sure that you're logging the traffic going in and out so you can understand deviations from that. And like I said, patch every once in a while. And there's actually a burgeoning area that can actually pen test operating technology devices without tipping them over or crashing them. So you can start understanding the risks across the organization.
That's a great call out. I like how you described the importance of segmentation, and, keeping things separate. One of the common issues with a lot of these OT devices is that they have very old operating systems on them, right? And they're very finicky. And as you mentioned, being able to pen test them without knocking them over, right? That's a lot of times some of the limitations that people have is when you're trying to deploy a security product or even check what's going on some of these devices, it can knock them over and all of a sudden they're not functioning. And if you're a manufacturing plant, that downtime leads to some real dollars, even if your intentions, were positive. So, that's a great call out in terms of how to make them less likely to tip over devices. Do you have any relevant recommendations around there? Any kind of tips or tricks you've learned through your time in the
Uh,
trade?
Tread carefully. I would say find experts that are well versed and have demonstrated that they know how to deal with operating technology. I mean, it's one thing to tip over a time clock or a camera system. It's a whole other thing to tip over a laser system. And so, human life could be in danger, things like that. So you definitely want to find people that are well skilled in operating technology and that you have also work with the business. You don't want to do this during Tuesday at 10 a.m.
It's a great call out. Yeah. Avoid the hours of maximum productivity, right? That's a
Right.
way to minimize you being the villain. So, one thing that a lot of viewers might be asking, and some of the other friends I have in my network that were looking to get into cyber, they ask about certifications, right? What is valuable? What is important? I saw that you hold both the CISSP and a CISM, which are some of the greatest within the industry. What do you think is the most important certification that you've gained thus far?
Both, really. The answer nobody really wants to hear is a both, and it depends on which one will be more important to you. The CISSP, mile wide, inch deep. CISM is more managerial. It really, I wanted to really demonstrate that I had the mental chops to do the job, but also the managerial credentials for that. So that's why I got both of those. Certificates tend to get you past filters, or at least when people that are trying to decide what they want to do. But it really depends on where you want to go in your career trajectory. You can spend your whole career never being in management and being quite happy doing quite well for yourself somewhere in cybersecurity in one of the niche fields. And if you like that, if you don't want to manage people, do that, right? But if you want to be in management or an executive, you're going to have to find a way to stand out.
That's a great point. I see a lot of people within business doing that for the sake of an MBA, right? How can you stand out among all the other people that are vying for the same position? With that being said, do you think that they were worth the effort looking back?
Um, It depends, right? It depends what the industry is asking for now. I always believe you should be preparing for the next step in your career, whether it's one of the major certifications, it's a degree, or one of the sub certifications. It depends where you want to go, right? So you talk to recruiters, look at job boards, talk with senior executives or board members if you have the opportunity. See what they're looking for, right? What's getting them the interviews and the jobs. And the reason I say that is because it can literally change from year to year. So you have to be a little bit reactive and you have to literally focus on what is actually getting the jobs now.
I actually saw a post the other day on LinkedIn that was talking about getting your first job in cyber is the hardest, but getting your second job is the easiest. Is that something you'd agree with, or would you disagree with that kind of statement?
I would agree with that. Yes, definitely, because it's hard demonstrating to a business that they should take a risk on you can be difficult. So if you're going in for those interviews and you're getting that opportunity to interview, even if you can demonstrate a medium amount of cybersecurity chops, but you demonstrate energy and drive and love for the field, that's more likely to get them to give you a chance. I'll tell you, when we're interviewing for people for their first positions, I am looking for energy. I can train everything else, but I cannot train drive and just character.
That's a great call out. So, I mean, that passion is infectious, right? You're in a very tough field where it's common to achieve burnout. So, having people that are positive and excited to come to work bleeds off on other people. It's great for team cohesion and just keeping the ball moving forward. Is that there's probably a lot of different pieces of advice that you can give to people that are beginning their journey into cyber. Would you say that energy is the main key? Are certs the main key? Is it a combination of multiple things? What's your piece of advice for those listening?
Yeah, I would say a little bit of both, right? You definitely want to demonstrate that you. It's one thing to say uh, I love cybersecurity or I have a lot of drive for it, but what have you done to demonstrate that? So you definitely want to have a little bit of chops, right? Whether it's demonstrating you've built home labs, you've done open source projects, you've worked on, capture the flags or any kind of mentorship. So you definitely want to, demonstrate that you've got an understanding. But again, that drive. And make sure that people are working, especially when they're trying to come into it, make sure they're finding their North Star, right? Pick a direction in cybersecurity. What are their focuses on? There's so much, it's so big that you can do so many different things. So it can be hard to track that down. So make sure that you are picking a focus and head for that obsessively.
Awesome. And once again, I want to remind the audience, feel free to ask questions. We will answer them live on air. But as we are approaching the end of our conversation, are there any non-cert learning opportunities that you'd like to highlight?
I would say non-certifications. I mean, Cybersecurity Leadership Institute is a cohort. It's a great program and resources for anybody trying to make that leap from a senior manager or director up to a CISO type level or VP type level. We actually had people in the cohort that were entry level because they're trying to find their North Star and trying to understand what that entails and whether or not they want to head for that. Um, there's a lot of low cost, no cost options as well to help you learn, whether it's home labs, YouTube videos, podcasts, reading articles, being on threat lists like CISA's threat list. Basically, if you're finding gaps in your knowledge, you don't understand what they're talking about, then you found an area that you may want to fill or decide how you want to fill it to help demonstrate your accolades in the field. So my last thought on that, though, is no matter where you are in your career arc, and absolutely myself as well, is be trainable, right? You want to be humble and make sure that you are always willing to learn and improve, especially listening to those that are smarter than you.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the feedback I've gotten from every mentor ever, right? Is being coachable. At the end of the day, people want to help you out, but you got to. It's like the old adage of you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. So you got to have that internal drive that makes you want to be successful and be willing to, humble yourself from time to time because other people might have better ideas than you do, right? I think that's a great call out. Well, as we're approaching, I don't see any questions thus far in the comments. So we're going to move to closing statements. Joe, it was amazing having you on here. Oh, we have someone who popped in. Joel Ferrietta has just asked, from a mental and operational resilience standpoint, how has Joe been able to create a balance between the day-to-day and personal time?
Um, Again, building up those processes so that way I can put a line in the sand and I can say, hey, here's where I'm willing to jump in. Here's where I'm willing to stay late or have to walk away, and know where those limits are. There's a lot of self-reflection in that, and understanding you're not a superhero, right? You're just a regular human trying to do good things, and again, building up a strong team, having the strong team and the resources, processes, and the escalation processes to allow you to walk away or the other team members to walk away.
It's a great call out and great question. Thank you, Joel. Well, everyone, that is our time. Thank you all for joining me for cutting through the noise. It has been a pleasure. Thank you, Joe, for taking the time to join us. And yeah, keep in contact. If anyone wants to connect with you out in the audience, what is the best way for them to reach out to you, Joe?
I typically stay off of most social media, but I am available on LinkedIn, so please feel free to connect with me on there.
Amazing. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in, and we will talk to you soon. Take care.
Thank you. It's been great. Loved it.